Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be back for today's RSK Quick Connect Facebook Live series. My name is Brittany Miller, and I'm excited to be hosting today. We have a great topic. We get lots of questions about it, raising special kids. But before we dive into that, I just want to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on your lunch hour and popping in for 10 minutes or so to learn about 504 Plan basics and what parents need to know. If you can believe it or not, fall is here. Many families have children that are on fall break this week or next week. We've been getting a lot of calls from parents with needing advice about 504 plans, so we thought it was very timely to do a quick connect on this topic. Before we get started, make sure you check out our training calendar. Our fall schedule is packed with trainings, so you want to check them out. We do have one coming up on 504 plans on October 15th, I believe. We do our IEP training, there's positive behavior support, a legal options training, and more. So make sure you head on over to raisingspecialkids.org and get yourself scheduled for a class this fall. Let's get to it. We have a lot of information to share today in a short amount of time, so let's get started. So we get a lot of calls at Raising Special Kids about 504 plans and what they are. How does my child qualify for one? How do I request one? What actually is it? What does it physically do? And how can it support my child in school? So today we're going to go over some basics about what parents need to know. So let's get started. So to start us off, I'm going to share with you, what exactly is Section 504. So it's part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is a national civil rights law, and it prevents discrimination on the basis of disability by a person that is participating in any sort of program that receives federal financial assistance. So of course, our public schools receive federal dollars, so they must provide and implement 504 plans for eligible students. Something to note as well, children that qualify for a 504 plan are also protected by ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So how do you qualify? So to qualify for a 504 plan, there must be three things the student has to have. Number one, they must have a physical or mental impairment. Number two, that must substantially limit. Number three, one or more major life activity. So if that is your child and you feel like they would benefit from a 504 plan and those supports in school, what do we do next? What is the process for requesting one and how is it developed? So it's interesting to note there is no really legally mandated process a school must follow. In the special education setting, the IEP process, there's very outline details about timelines and what school districts are supposed to do and follow and all of that. But Section 504, it's not that way. So many states and school districts may have their own rules, but generally it happens something like this. So first we suggest, gather the documents, document your child's needs. Your child must have that physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. So document those things if that happens, or if that's happening. Some examples could be, caring for oneself, seeing, speaking, standing, eating, breathing, learning, communicating, reading, lifting, concentrating, the list goes on. Next, gather those documents. If you have any paperwork from the physician, documenting a medical diagnosis, that can be helpful to share. Other things you can gather are, schoolworks, report cards, any sort of assessments done that you can share with the school. Now, just to note, a medical diagnosis is not required to be assessed for a 504 plan, and it may not determine eligibility either. Remember, they have to have a physical and mental impairment, but it also has to substantially limit a life activity. So they will be assessed to see if they qualify. So after you gather those documents, document any needs that you're observing on your child, the next step is to contact the 504 coordinator from your district. So figure out who that is. Of course, you can call and ask. Often it could be the principal at the school that is assigned as a 504 coordinator. Sometimes the special education director of that district holds that role as well. It just depends. But every district must have a 504 coordinator that oversees the 504 plans in the district and making sure those students receive those services. So we suggest you do everything in writing, of course. We always suggest that to families at Raising Special Kids. Write a formal request, send off an email to request that your child be evaluated for a 504 plan. And, list some of the reasons why, some of the concerns you're having, if they have a certain diagnosis, you feel like they need benefit from accommodations for, send off a request in writing. You could include the teacher, maybe the principal, anybody that works with your child the school psychologist, what have you, and send that off and formally request it. Now, if you need a little help formulating your words or using a template, at Raising Special Kids, we have some great sample letters we can share with you. So please reach out to us. We'll go ahead and put our contact information in the chat. If you call us, we of course can talk about this process in more detail with you and help you with your child's individual needs, but also get you some of those resources in that template letter to help you get that process started. Once you've sent off that formal request, follow up on it. Typically they're timely and in responding to you, but it's good practice to check on things and making sure that they receive the email and that the request is in process. The school, they will want to do their own review. So they will want to review your child's schoolwork, if you choose to share medical records, any documentation they have, assessments, things like that. They'll do a review to see if this child may benefit and if they agree that they need a 504 plan. Often they'll want to observe and talk with your child. They may want to interview you and talk with your child's teacher and other school staff that work with them. So they're going to do their own assessment and review process. And if more assessments are needed, they also could order those and schedule them. So after all of that, review of data happens, they will meet with you and let you know if whether or not your child qualifies for a 504 plan. You can also ask for this meeting as well, but often it's initiated by the school and we'll discuss, yes, we feel like a 504 plan is appropriate and your child is eligible, or no, and then why. But at that point, once you make that decision, let's say your child qualifies, let's talk about the next steps, okay? So if your child qualifies for a 504 plan, you're going to want to work together with that school team to get that plan created and implemented for your child. Something kind of interesting, I was actually surprised when I learned this a while back, that 504 plans actually do not have to be written down, which seems a little weird, I know. Most school districts do this. It's actually a written document. In writing is, of course, best practice, but legally it does not have to be written down, which I've always found very interesting. So what is this thing, right? What does a 504 plan include? Well, typically it includes accommodations to help support your child in school, and it's very individualized. So it also could provide the names of those who will provide those accommodations or support to your child, documented in that 504 plan, and what services will be given or where or how that will happen. A good written plan is not required, but of course best practice. There isn't a timeline of when 504 plans have to be updated. Typically it's a good idea if you at least update annually, meet with the school team, review the 504 plan with them, see if it's still appropriate, if anything needs to be changed or edited, but there isn't a requirement. And if you have a concern before that, you certainly can call a meeting with the 504 plan team and make changes if needed for your child. So there are hundreds of accommodation ideas. The possibilities are endless. And so kind of a simple way to explain accommodations is an accommodation doesn't change what they're learning. So if your child has a 504 plan, they're learning what their typical developing peers are learning in class. A 504 plan typically doesn't change any of that. But maybe because of their disability, they need some accommodations to be able to have equal access to that curriculum. For example, maybe they need changes to their environment, like a quiet place for testing so they can focus better. Maybe they need words repeated back to them, or a note taker to help them. Maybe they need preferential seating so they can focus. Maybe if they have ADHD or sensory needs, accommodation could be a built-in sensory break during the day. If they have issues with their blood sugar, maybe the accommodation is they're allowed to have a snack. If they need social emotional support from the counselor, that could be something that's offered as an accommodation in a 504 plan. There are so many possibilities, and we have some great resources we can share with you. If you head over to our website under the resources section, if you go to education, you scroll down a little bit, there are some 504 plan resources with some accommodations ideas as well. But certainly if you want to talk it through with us, we can give you some suggestions. That way when you meet with your school team, you can bring some ideas. But really there are so many out there, and it's important to remember it's very individualized for each child, right? Remember, accommodations don't change what kids learn. It gives them equal access. So it doesn't change what kids learn, it changes how they learn it. The goal is to remove barriers and give children access to learning. Accommodations may address specific challenges. Some other examples, if a child has ADHD and they're easily distracted, maybe they get that front seat, like I mentioned, that preferential seating. More time is the most common accommodation actually in IEPs as well, and very important. A lot of children with disabilities, they just need more time to complete assignments or tests. A child with dyslexia may be allowed to use text-to-speech technology. Some kids may get services. It's not as common. Typically, a child that gets related services would qualify for special education with an IEP. However, in some cases, if it's determined needed by the 5004 team, the child could receive services like occupational therapy or speech in school. And some children can receive support for social emotional challenges. While it's rare, 504 plans can provide accommodations. Unlike accommodations, the difference is, modifications, they do change what the student is taught. They modify what they're expected to learn. Students may get fewer homework assignments, maybe less test questions, or they may be graded in a different way. However, something to remember, that's not as common. Typically 504 plans are accommodations, and they're learning and have access to what all the other peers are learning, and they can handle that. They just need some accommodations to give them that equal access because of their disability. So again, there are tons of accommodations out there. Your school team will have ideas, but if you need some good resources to check out, some helpful ones, we will put a few links in the comments. And of course, reach out to Raising Special Kids. We can talk to you about your child's individual needs. So something else too that's good to know, a lot of parents don't realize, is Section 504 does not only protect students against discrimination in school and educational settings, it also requires equal access to non-academic programs sponsored by the district. So if they have the ability to make the sports team and they or the choir team, dance company, they qualify on their own skills and merit, they can have a 504 accommodations in that setting because it's sponsored by the school. Field trips, extracurricular activities, additional athletics. Children with 504 plans can have some accommodations if they make those teams and they're in those settings that are non-academic but sponsored by the school. So, sometimes, people are human, things don't go perfectly, and parents call us with questions about, things aren't going well with my 504 plan. Maybe they're having a hard time working with the school. In some cases, maybe the 504 plan isn't being followed, and they're kind of wondering, what are my rights? What can I do? Of course, first, we encourage that, going up the chain of command, that parent-professional collaboration, communicating your concerns, scheduling a meeting, talking it out. But in some cases, dispute resolution options have to happen. They're there for a reason. And so some things to remember about your rights if your child has a 504 plan. School districts must establish grievance procedures for resolving complaints, and typically you can find that on their website. They also must designate a 504 coordinator to ensure compliance and be a contact person for parents to inform them about the grievance process and to help them with any issues that arise. You can also ask for a hearing where an impartial officer hears your case if you feel like there's been discrimination against your child. You can also file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, often called an OCR complaint. If parents are not satisfied with the responses through the other grievance proceedings, talking with the school, filing a grievance, even a hearing, or a district complaint, there are additional actions, including that filing a complaint with OCR. So to file a discrimination complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, you want to contact your appropriate regional office. Arizona's is actually in Denver, Colorado, and we will go ahead and put the link to that in the chat. The Office of Civil Rights, they primarily review cases looking at 504 procedures and seeing if the child was discriminated against. Complaints must be filed within 180 days of the incident happening or that discrimination when it allegedly occurred. Complaints can be filed by an individual or an organization and address discrimination against one child, or if it's a group of students or a systematic issue. OCR will investigate complaints through data collection and possibly an on-site review at times. In individual complaints, an informal process called early complaint resolution is an option. So after the investigation is done by OCR, they will issue a letter of finding that states whether or not there was a violation, and if so, what those corrective actions would be. So they do investigate and they will let you know. You'll be notified. If school districts do not implement the needed changes, OCR can initiate proceedings to suspend or terminate federal funding, financial assistance, or they'll be referred to the Department of Justice. There is no timeline requirement for when OCR must initiate letter of findings, let you know what happens with the investigation. And we will put in the chat on how to do that. And of course, if you want to talk it out, if you have individual questions and need help with something more dispute resolution related or a more serious nature like that, we certainly can help you and give you those resources. So in closing, a 504 plan can provide accommodations which allow the student to learn and participate in school by removing barriers to learning. Remember, these students don't need specialized instruction, just equal access to learning that may be impacted due to the impairment or disability they have. If you have questions about the 504 plan process, you need help with requesting it, or you have a meeting coming up with the team and you need some advice or some accommodation ideas that might benefit your child, please reach out to Raising Special Kids. We are happy to help you. And just remember, our training calendar is up for fall. I did note that our next 504 training is October 15th. We encourage you to join us. It's called Understanding 504. Our trainings are at no cost to families, and this one is virtual. We would love for you to attend, so we will put that registration link in the chat. And in that training, we do go into more detail. But if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.